guys around the world and the great beyond, welcome back to another episode of the Schtuff podcast. I am your faithful host, Anthony Claiborne, coming to you from the East Coast, USA, joined as always by from the uppermost tip of Thailand, John, the Red Man SB. How you doing today, John?
What's up, everybody from the future? It's good to see you. Good to have everybody joining us today. I missed all you guys. Another week gone by, and I hadn't got to talk to y'all, man. So I'm just excited to be here talking with my boy Anthony and my used to be my boy Mike, but now I found out that Joker went eating sushi with somebody else and didn't eat sushi with me for 2.5 years, and now he's cheating on me going to eat sushi with other people, and I'm just like, you know what? I'm done with it. Our relationship's over, man. I'm just saying.
Well, so apparently today's episode is going to be about relationships, is what it sounds like to me. John, you've already called his name, but introduce our guest today, if you will, please.
Well, this is my once good friend, Dr. Mike Tacaks. Used to be known to me as just Mike, but now it's Dr. Tacaks, so he makes me call him that every time I talk to him. Actually, he doesn't make me do that. I have to talk to his secretary to get an appointment to talk to him, and she's like, "Would you like me to tell Dr. Tackas to call you back?" And I'm like, "Yes, please."
And then he never does, right?
He never does. He's like, "You know what? Nah, I'm not talking."
Just doesn't do it.
Okay, first of all, she's not a secretary; she's a personal assistant. So.
Oh, little highbrow.
Makes sense. Either way, she's kind of mean. I'm just saying, she kind of, you know, put a foot down or two. You know what I'm saying? You need to step on that because she's kind of mean.
Now, once John tells you what Dr. Mike Tackas does, it's not going to shock you guys that John knows him really well. John, what does he do?
Well, Dr. Tackas is are you a counselor now or a psychiatrist? I never know what to call you now. What's the official quack is not a term I can use anymore.
Yeah. Shrink. Yeah. No, it's a counselor.
Counselor. Okay.
Just gives you meds.
He's a mental health professional.
Exactly.
That's why we have him sitting down with us.
Exactly.
That's right.
We brought him on to do some free therapy for us. We're like, hey, look, you've got some issues going on. Let's bring on a counselor to talk to him, and we can just secretly have a 2-hour, session for free, But Mike is actually, he's not only a counselor. He lives there in Lynchburg, Virginia. His office is there in Lynchburg, or technically Forest, the Forest, Virginia. Over on that side, on the good side of Lynchburg. And so I got to mess with Mike because I haven't seen him forever.
You tell me there's a rough side of Lynchburg? I thought the entire town was just Liberty's
campus. No. Let me tell you this. Where me and Mike live, right? We used to live right on the street from each other. There's a food line in between his house and my house. I have watched 2 women go at it, threatening to shoot each other in the food line, and then had to call the cops to come in to break the fight up because they were fighting about one of them was like,
well, when you get the last pack of pork chops, son, it's on. I mean,
it's been interesting. So me and Mike would say we live on the other side of the tracks when we lived there. We were on the good side, on the fun side, put it that way.
So Mike, you live in Lynchburg. You live in Lynchburg, VA. Now, tell our guys who are listening, and some of them may tune out once you tell them this. I don't know, but tell everybody a little bit about, just briefly, where you grew up. What was family life like growing up? Mom, dad, sisters, brothers.
Hold up, man. Hold up. Why? You ain't even telling him what he's like. The biggest thing, he's over the graduate program of Liberty is counseling stuff, and he heads that up, man. He takes people that want to become counselors. He's the advisor for them, man. So that's one of his main titles. He's up there at LU. We're 3 LU grads.
Dr. Mike Tackas, PhD, counselor, advisor.
There you go. Red
Now,
flag.
when
all
you
those titles don't even blend the way they're nor do they have as much legitimacy as John is bringing them to.
So what I'm hearing you say is you were an illegitimate counselor. Is that what you want to tell everybody
I am
today?
an illegitimate counselor. Yeah, I'm really an imposter. I just struggle with imposter syndrome and just trying to fake it till I make it.
All right, this is a question that I have, and me and Anthony did an interview with a guy that we think he was a director of a movie, and we think he actually hired a crazy person to play the villain in this movie. Now, like, you talk about like delusion, like disorder, like what would be a key thing? Like if somebody, like I would say somebody that has some type of issues that you could tell and go, this person is kind of keying off on me, like is throwing some red flags. Like what's the chances he's got like 47 dead cats in his backyard? Like what would be the chances of running upon someone who's actually a psychopath, but posing as a normal person? What's the chances of that, Dr. Tacaks?
Mel Gibson.
I mean there's legitimate there's legitimate data on what that percentage is, which is very, very, very low.
Really?
It's funny because it's similar to the percentage of people who would actually be legitimate like narcissists. Like that percentage of the population is really low. So like when you hear people say like, well, I'm a narcissist or that person's a narcissist, it's like, well, no, they're just really self-centered people.
See, so now, Anthony, I'm not a narcissist. I'm not a narcissist, Anthony.
Just
see,
not a nice person.
Mike's already just told us there's a low chance that I'm actually narcissistic personality disorder.
So, all right.
It's not impossible though.
So, is it one of those deals like
with him?
is it like one of those deals like where when somebody self-describes themselves as something they probably aren't it? Is that what you find to be the case?
Yeah. Most narcissists are not going to be able to identify themselves as narcissists. So.
Yes. So, got you. Except for like Jeffrey Dahmer's like, I'm a serial killer. Turns out was true.
Yeah. Well, that's a bit of different story with him. So
this went dark, man.
When you have body parts in your house, that don't belong to you.
I got friends in crawl spaces.
Yeah.
That's what may be a clue that you crazy. If you can, any guys out there watching or listening, if you have some body parts
in your freezer
that don't belong to you, you might be crazy. Just saying.
Just for the record,
I have no idea what's even happening now. It is off the rails. We're
trying to reach men. Men may be crazy. We may have some legit crazy guys. One of the guys that maybe we're trying to interview later. We got to learn some key stuff for him because he may be crazy.
I just asked a benign question. That's all I asked. Hey, Mike, where are you from, man? Tell me a little bit about your background. And next thing I know, we're talking about body parts and freezers.
This is typical conversation how it goes with when I talk with John.
It's interesting. Ain't nobody care where you from, Mike. Ain't nobody care where you from.
Well, I cared just a little.
Well, thank you, Anthony. It feels good to feel appreciated.
I want to know you as a person, not as a title.
Thank you.
I see you.
It's good not to feel used all the time. Have you ever seen that movie, What About Bob?
Yes, long time ago.
This is how John and I's relationship actually is. He just shows up in my events, and he's really a client. And he was like, hey, can we do some counseling this morning? And then here I am on some show.
Exactly. Like, hey, I need to.
He's like, here's my friend.
That's great.
So one day, somehow we show up. One day there was a snowstorm over in Lynchburg, which happens fairly rarely. But there was like a way you could walk behind my house to get to Mike's house. But it was through the woods. You had to cross like a river and through a field, and you had to like fight a dragon. And then there was like this, like a couple wild dogs you had to go through. And so anyway, one day I don't even call Mike because he ain't listening. He never answers my call. He's like, it's like, what about Bob? He just never answers the guy's calls back. He's like, I'm trying to have time with my wife, John. And so I'm like, well, I want to hang out, dude. So I just hike to his house. I'm like, I'm going to go on a quest. I'm going on a quest through the woods. in the snow, almost drowned 4 times. Get there, and Mike's like, how's it going, man? Doing all right? Yeah. Well, I got to leave. And so then I have to hike back through the woods. He didn't even
give you a ride?
No, Joey didn't give me a ride. Didn't care. I could have been frozen to death. Nothing. He's like, well, I got to go. Sorry. And I had to hike back through the dangers of the woods to get to my house again. So that's kind of friend Mike is.
Okay, hold on. So dangerous that he brought an 8-year-old with him.
Okay, so here's what I'm picturing. Here's what I picture right now. I picture John, and he probably didn't even have the beard back then, but I picture him with a beard. And I picture him with this cloak on and a staff. And maybe he's got a sword hanging on. And the wind is blowing, and it's like blizzard, and he's leaning into it. And that you thought that was an 8-year-old, but no, that was a hobbit.
A hobbit.
If y'all know who Tenacious D is?
Yeah,
of course.
We don't listen to those kind of things.
Well, if you know who Tenacious D are, you don't know, look up Wonder Boy. The song Wonder Boy, the video for Wonder Boy. That's what happened. That's what happened to me going to Mike's house, and I didn't even get a ride back to the house. Like, no.
There's, I never mind. I just can't. Off air.
Anyway, we derail this train really quick.
Yeah. So let's get back to me. Let's talk about me for a while.
Let's talk about me. Let's talk about mine.
Let's talk about narcissism again. What was that now?
Yeah, remember that conversation? We might circle back to that.
I just want to know just a little bit about where you're from, because I feel like where you come from sometimes has a direct impact on, the kind of person you become. Like, look at John. He's from Mississippi.
Mississippi.
There's some fine people come out of Mississippi. Fine people.
Eating alligator tail and crickets.
If you ain't never tried alligator tail, you can't say nothing about
alligator tail's good, actually.
I've had alligator.
So, Mike, back to you, my friend.
Back to me. So, I grew up in New York, on Long Island. So, not as much as like a city boy, but definitely a little bit different culture. And then moved to the South.
So you were cussing before you could say full sentences. Is that correct?
Probably. Moved to the South, what we call the South. I know some folks, who live in Mississippi. And
I'm gonna pause you right there real quick. We're gonna pause. Put a pin in that one. Put a pin in that one. Hold up. You came south of New York. You did not come to the South. I'm just saying. People get mad. You can write letters all you want to, hate mail. I don't care. You came to. Still don't matter. If anybody can call North Virginia, I'm gonna ask a serious question. I'm gonna ask serious questions to my other Southern friend right here.
I got you with your serious question. Go ahead.
Other serious question. Do you consider Northern Virginia the South in culture, ideas, lifestyle, political leanings, any of that?
We don't even consider Northern Virginia anymore.
I was about to say. Okay, yeah, I was about to say. Because here's the deal.
In Washington.
like Virginia is clearly the South, all right? I mean, let me finish. You classic Calvinist can't shut up and just listen. I'm teasing. I love you, man.
Woo.
I mean, you're talking about Robert E. Lee, like right
that's
there,
like
right there. I mean, but there is a sharp dividing line between Southern Virginia and Northern Virginia. Northern Virginia is not. That's like a whole nother country.
You get past Charlottesville.
Well, there's a sweet tea line. That's how you know it.
Where's the sweet tea line?
The sweet tea line is Fredericksburg, Virginia. Well, I used to live in Woodbridge. When we first got married, we lived in Woodbridge, and we would drive on Saturdays before we had kids. We would drive down to Cracker Barrel in Fredericksburg so we could have sweet tea with our meal without them bringing us some sugar packet that won't ever going to mix into that tea.
That's what I want to get. I'm asking questions. I'm sorry. What kind of I'm not gonna say the word I want to say. I'm gonna say mentally handicapped person, mentally like messed up person, Mike. I'm be respectful of your job and stuff. A mentally person who is deranged will think, I'm going to take a cold drink and try to dump enough sugar into it that it actually dilutes into the liquid. And like, what kind of like mental
They don't know
illness?
science.
What is the mental illness of that? Like, what is wrong with you people? Like,
Well, I have to say, and this may be very unpopular, and I hope y'all understand the heart of where it comes from. But there are often times, and please don't misunderstand, I have a good number of Northern brothers that I love. Like they are in my tribe. But I sometimes look at behaviors of Northern dudes and I'm like, how did we freaking lose a war to these people?
I'm saying.
And
How did that happen?
Sweet tea line is what caused that whole thing.
That's it.
Yeah, it was. That's what it was.
Sweet tea line.
Well documented.
Exactly.
At one point, the capital was in Virginia.
I will say that's that one time. At one time, it was actually trying to be put in Mississippi. They wanted the capital to be like, oh, let's go to Mississippi with it, and they're like, no, let's go to Virginia.
Nobody said that.
The president of the Confederacy was from Mississippi.
Here's what I don't understand for real, lazy. From a strategic standpoint.
I don't want to go all the way to freaking.
Who thought it was a good
That's like a 47-hour wagon trail
close to the Union Capitol. Who thought that was a good idea?
Exactly. Why are you gonna be like
the Confederate capital within a day's march of the Union Capitol? I'd have put it in Mississippi. I'd have put it in Daggum, like.
And that's why the South lost.
I'd put it in El Paso, Texas.
Put it as far south, like you got to go through all the swamps to get to it. You got to go through all.
Put it in the swamp.
Exactly. Like, we don't want to go there.
The
folks got to battle alligators and anacondas and all that.
The mini ball don't get you, the gator will. So I digress. So
I grew up in Long Island.
So my first mistake in life was I was born in New York.
Exactly. I'm glad you repented of that mistake, Mike. I'm glad you see an error of your ways.
Moved to the South, or what some appear to be the South of New York at least.
There you
go. Do they have sweet tea in Lynchburg?
They do have sweet tea in Lynchburg.
All right, you good.
Yeah. So
where at though?
Lynchburg's got a Cracker
Barrel, man.
I mean, I'm sorry. If you got a Hardee's, it's automatically south. And we got a Hardee's. So never mind. You proved your point. I'm sorry. My bad. Keep going.
No comment.
Keep going. My bad.
So moved here, and then had a big culture shock being different. Having a different having a New York accent, which clearly I don't have right now.
You've done well to eliminate that preposterous.
Well, it wasn't intentional, but it definitely changed. I mean, you're definitely an outcast when you got a New York accent. So, hanging out in Lynchburg. So
your mom still has a very thick New York accent.
She does, and when I get around my New York folks, it shows its head again, and you
backslide. I think in the spiritual world we call that backsliding.
My roots really go back. You backslide into all those things we shouldn't be backsliding into. So so you start drinking hot tea, and
wearing scarves.
I bet you even hold your pinky out.
Wearing ascots and
right. Talking about Buffy and going out boating with Buffy and
getting my croquet out.
Let's take the sailboat out this weekend, Buffy.
So I mean, that's just kind of like that's what happened when you became a doctor. All that stuff just kind of fell back out.
It was like old hat, man. Just jumped right back into it. So,
exactly.
Out there playing polo with my peers and my colleagues.
So
you friends no more. You got colleagues.
Exactly. No, these are my colleagues from work. So I would imagine we talked about this a little bit. And we can bring this up. We'll see how deep you want to go into it. But talking about that, I mean, as a guy, you are in your field of study. You're a doctor. You have put many years in this. You've worked with troubled teens, and you work with troubled men. You work with all kind of stuff, and yet you find yourself surrounded by a majority of women in your field. How does that make you feel? How does that work? Is there any tension in there that happens, like trying to go into like a man and a female's world? Like, does it give you insight of how maybe like a female feels going to a man's world? Like what's some of the, can you talk to us about that a little bit? Tell me what you're thinking there, man.
You know, it's interesting because it's being in that field. I mean, all the women that I'm around are all highly educated, very tenacious. I mean, just you know, they really are strong, amazing women. And you know, sometimes it's a bit intimidating, to be honest with you, to be the only guy in there. It's like, wow, like I just need to kind of shut up because I'm the stupid one in the room, you know. And so so one thing that's really helped me as a person that kind of trickles out professionally as a counselor, you know. So I work with couples a lot, and one of the biggest things that they always struggle with is communication. And so being able to interact with women on a regular basis requires a lot of really just good, strong communication and understanding. And so being able to really do that well has helped me as not just as a professional, you know, to help other people, but as an individual, as a father, as, you know, a father of daughters, as a husband, you know. And you know, it helps you be what's really called emotional maturity. Like, you know, you really start getting a little bit more emotionally mature to where you can talk about things that and articulate things that most guys can't, you know. That's a real struggle. So
and we talk about emotional maturity. Are you speaking like we can say the word like a word and not laugh about it? Like we can talk about sex and not giggle? Or are you talking about like some other kind of emotional maturity that's in there? Like, what's
I never giggle when I talk about sex personally. That's just me. I don't know.
Y'all, we may, never mind. I ain't gonna say about too much editing. We're gonna do. We're just gonna, never mind. Just answer the question, Dr. Tacaks.
So that would be just maturity. So, you know, I do still lack in that in some regard.
Where, so that makes, you know, okay.
Fart jokes are pretty funny, and, you know, and things like that. So
it's okay to be an 8th grader when it comes to your sense of humor, but you want to be mature in what?
Yeah, well, so girls don't laugh when you fart around them. So, you know, it's a different dynamic for sure. So you gotta pull back on that, where guys are a little bit different, you know, when you tell those kind of jokes and things. But emotional maturity is more about being able to identify and articulate your emotions well, you know. And for most of the time, us guys, we really struggle in that because our emotions, we think, are just anger and not angry. Like that's about it, you know. And so, you know, the anger is just really just a secondary emotion, but we think that that's what it is what the problem is, and that's not what the problem is. That's how we get it out. And so most of the time when I see things like, especially when guys get referred to me for anger management, the majority of the time it's things like depression and anxiety that they really are struggling with. And it comes out as that because we don't know how to, you know, we're taught really, really young as guys in our culture, you know, to rub dirt on it, stop crying, don't be a sissy, right? I mean, that's what I was told my whole life growing up from all the other men around me was, you know, don't let them see you cry. Just suck it up, you know. But it's okay socially for a guy to be angry and hit things and throw a temper tantrum, you know, as far as like, well, that's just a guy thing to do, you know. Now, if a woman does that, what do they call her? They're like, oh, well, she's crazy, you know. But a guy can do that and be like, oh, man, just chill out, man. You know, you'll be all right. You know, no big deal. We all get that way. So that's where it really kind of changes is you're able to really say, what is it really that's causing you to be that way? You know, like when I mean, okay, so Giants fan, all right. So I mean, y'all can crucify me in that in a little bit.
Imagine that a guy from New York is a Giants fan.
Am I getting kicked off the show?
That's all good. I mean, I'm a Cowboys fan. I can't rag anybody.
If I actually watch football, I could have I've
This
never.
makes no sense to me why you don't watch football. What is wrong with you?
Man,
Why are you so masculine with so many other things, but you don't get into the football?
Look, man, look. All right, this is why. I'll tell you. I go back into my childhood.
He can tell you why. Then I'm gonna tell you why.
I'm from the South.
No, it's not that. It's
because he grew up in SEC football land where Alabama and Auburn destroy everybody else. So
no, I ain't got nothing to do with that crap. I didn't even know who Alabama was. I didn't know Alabama had a football team
or where it was.
Yeah, it's over there, Papa. Anyway, but like growing up, like our school was a small school. From kindergarten through 12th grade, we had 700 people, right? And so all we had was baseball and basketball. Only two sports we had. And so I was like, you know what? I don't really like basketball. I really don't like baseball too much. I just play them because my friends play them. And so I was like, I might could get into football. That actually looks like it'd be fun. Well, the only way you can do that is a transfer, and my parents wouldn't let me transfer to play football. And so I'm like, all right, never mind. I just don't do football. So I did martial arts instead. So here we are. So now that's why I don't play football. And I tried to play, like come up and like, oh, let me get into football when I went and moved to Virginia because, it's the autumn, it's the leaves changing. It feels good and crisp and cold. And it was just like, it was boring, man. I'm sorry. It was just.
There's a lot to unpack here, okay? There's a lot to unpack here.
There's so much going on right now.
All right, so first off, no one goes to a football game to watch football.
Yeah.
Okay. You go to a football game to enjoy the crisp weather, eat peanuts, tailgate, eat really crappy food that's bad for you. Maybe watch a fight in the parking lot.
No, see, that sounds like fun. I went to one tailgate party in my entire life. One tailgating event, and I was working at Nissan, and I was one of the only white dudes there, right, in my shop. One of them. There was a few of them. Most of them was African American guys that my friends. I loved them, and they invited me to go to watch JSU to the tailgate. I wasn't going to go in and watch the game because I didn't care about the game. We was like, hey, come out and tailgate with us. And I was like, cool. So I went out there and had a blast just tailgating. That was fun. That was great. Fast forward 7 years, whatever, I'm in Virginia. The only time I get to tailgate with Mike here is at our daughter's soccer game out front of school.
That's a kind of football.
We just sat out on the tailgate.
We did. But we did, okay, that's a true story. Now, the other part of that true story was like, we were like, you know what? Let's start doing a dad tailgate thing out here and start really making this like a real event, Now, these
that's
are like,
fantastic.
Meanwhile, John and I are concocting this plan on how to make this like with barbecues and all kinds of stuff in a church parking lot, right? And our daughters are literally like standing in the field, not even playing soccer, just talking to each other, picking flowers and stuff. So we're like, how do we make this more aggressive? Like, having matching like leather vests and stuff.
I don't think there's a 3-part patch for kids soccer.
We would have come up with it that day. That's sure.
The daisies.
It'd be like bacon strips.
Oh my god.
So
all right, so I want to back up and grab something here that you were talking about for the guys. A lot of guys that are listening, and if we're honest, a lot of guys listening have dealt with anger in one way or the other. And I have, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about my own story today, but you hit on something that is so important because I think it's key. I don't believe that you can deal with garbage in your life as a guy until you get real and honest about it and stop making excuses and actually own up to what it is that's really the root. And so you hit on something that I would love if you would address with our guys. Anger and other things like anger, what we so often refer to as porn addiction, even alcoholism, which alcoholism, there's some genetics there, but obviously, a lot of these things are symptomatic of a deeper issue. Why do you think it is dudes are so susceptible, or is it just human nature? I don't know. Why are us guys so susceptible to not dealing with the root, but instead acting out in some other way?
Well, I think a big part of that is that one, it is we're stereotyped is that's what it's supposed to look like. So when our football team loses, what does it look like? Well, it's supposed to look like I'm walking around angry, kicking things and slamming things and yelling at the TV because my team's losing, right? And so socially, it's supported with men in general of just like, well, that's how we handle things, and so as a culture, that's what it looks like. The same thing with a lot of these other kind of addiction things, right? Okay, so like when you think of, we're just joking about tailgating, right? And so what was the real deal about going tailgating? Well, eating a bunch of food, right? And then when I'm talking about, well, bacon, right? You just say bacon to a group of guys and they're like, yeah, bacon, like, and so it's just that stereotypical behavior that we're expected to have to begin with, right? And so when you add in other types of maladaptive, what is called maladaptive coping skills, right? So just coping skills that are wrong, which is if you're upset, hit something. If you're sad, punch something. If you're angry, punch something. If you're lonely, punch something, or, what's the other thing you can do? Well, socially acceptable for most, most of the culture is, well, had a bad day at work, go have a beer. Have a good day at work, go have a beer. It's like the encouragement of, well, you can drink alcohol when you're upset. That's what it looks like. That's what we put on TV. That's what we put in everything. I mean, even, we were joking a little bit about comic book stuff earlier, right? There's even comics where like Superman goes to the bar like when he's upset. I mean, Superman, it's like, come on.
And
man.
Tony Stark is a great example in the actual Iron Man comics. Tony Stark is an alcoholic,
right?
And a recovering alcoholic, and that's his struggle the whole time.
But the question I have of that too is this: it's like there is something that is ingrained, like the testosterone that we have makes us prone to more aggressive behavior, right? Would want to act out in that way. I think that's why, jiu-jitsu is such a great outlet. Muay Thai is a great outlet, something that you can actually get aggression out in a channel way. Would you say that's a maladaptive way of doing it, or you think that's healthy?
No, it's actually a healthy way. And so, I love.
It's good you said that, because if you'd have said anything different, the interview would have probably been over.
Right, we would never air this. We're never airing this.
All credibility with John. He'd be like, we done. He's an idiot. He don't know what he's talking about.
These guys are quiet.
That's right. That's right. Well, what's great about doing martial arts. I mean, John does jits a lot. I love doing the Muay Thai stuff, and so while it's one's a standing, one's a rolling. The whole thing is if you let your emotions get the best of you, and you start getting too angry, you lose your focus and you start making mistakes and you lose. And so I've been hit in the face a few times and kicked in the face a few times by letting that stop me. Where I'm like, all right, I'm getting aggravated because they're doing this. But then you got to readily get a hold to it, because if not, you're going to get rocked. They're just you're going to get sloppy and start pulling haymakers and things like that and lose. And so it's a great thing to do. Really and truly, one of the things that I see that really attribute to a lot of issue is, God made us men to work the fields. I mean, like, we're supposed to have a good hard day's work, like physical work. That's what we're supposed to do. And it's not just a physical process, it's a mental process. I mean, when I treat people for pornography addiction, what I give them is things. I'm like, man, I want you to start coming up with these tasks, these small tasks, 5-minute tasks, things you can get done in 5 minutes, and things you can get done in a couple hours, both inside and outside. And you're going to go to that list when you have the urge to use. Because in there is a cyclical process of completion. All right. And so, and most guys know this. Any guy that has cut their own grass and finished cutting the grass and then stood on their porch and looked and was like, man, look at what I did. You know, look how good that looks. That feeling that you get is that feeling that you want. And so that's what we need. And God has made us that way. I mean, we even see it in the cycles of the year. I mean, there's a planting season, there's a nurturing, growing season, a working season, there's a harvesting season, and then there's a rest season. And that's what our day is supposed to look like. You know, I mean, God knows what he's doing when he made us. You know, I mean, it's like, this is just what everything looks like for us. And so when we get into something, when I see guys come in and they're like, yeah, they're angry all the time, you know, they start being more solitary because they stay away from the family, not because of the depression, but because they don't know how to manage that emotions. And it's better to just be away from people than it is to try, as far as what their process of thinking, to be away from people and try to figure it out because we're fixers, than to be a part of it and talk about it, you know, and which we're not good at. We've not been brought up to be good at. And so when we do things to where we engage in the processes that God had us be a part of, you know, or I see guys who have been working in fields to where there's no actual end to what they're doing. You know, it's just the same thing day in and day out. Then I see the same behavior a lot where they're just like, there's no meaning, there's no purpose. You know, I go in and I press that bumper out in that machine every day. I'm gonna come back tomorrow. There's gonna be 1,000 more buttons I gotta hit to make that bumper come out. You know, they don't see progress. They don't see the harvest of their work. And so that's a big struggle for guys. They have to see that and have that completion. So, you know, so it's just being mindful and cognizant of those things of what is it that's actually causing guys to do that. But we don't have the emotional maturity to really recognize that. So when they come into my office and they need help with that, you know, I kind of dig into what's going on. What does life look like? And, you know, it's not always the same exact thing, but it's always very, very similar in what goes on. Predominantly, that's what it looks like. So
you hit on like 1,000 incredible things in all of that. You know, I agree with you. I think men, we are wired for work. I think we're wired for battle. Truly, I think it's in our DNA, and we live in a world that there's not a place for that unless you're actually in the military. So it is super important for guys. I'm with you guys. I started martial arts when I was 19 years old, and had I not done that, I don't even know where I'd be, to be honest with you, because I did some very unhealthy things with that side of myself prior to that. And I think men need that physical outlet to release that pin-up testosterone or whatever, you know, however you want to look at it. But you hit on something that's so huge. I think a lot of what we struggle with as men is that we live in a world where typically there is no completion. There is no end to our job. There is no end to what even what John does. You know, John having an organization that their job is to fight sex trafficking. The reality is, and I'm not trying to depress John, but the reality is, and I think he's smart enough to know it, it's not going to be an end to it as long as there's people. Now, we can combat it. We can save all we can save. We can cut it. There's a lot we can do, but the reality is, you know, as long as there's sin in the world, and there will be until Jesus sets it right, there's not going to be an end to it. And which I would think for you, even, you know, Mike, Dr. Mike, that's
Dr. Tacaks to you. That's Dr. Tacaks to you.
Sorry, Dr. Tacaks. I think that would even think that even be challenging for you, because in a sense you are bearing the weight of the guys you work with, and there's never, sadly, going to be an end to the line of people that really need to see you. So in dealing with the root, what can we, as you know, what can pastors who are listening, if any pastors even listen to us, and they may be like, I ain't listening to them jokers, but if any pastors are listening, any church leaders, because we want to help, you know, build the local church. That's what we're about. What can we do to start helping break these cycles and help young men to learn at an early age. It's all right to cry. It's okay. It's all good. There's a difference between being whiny, and I think we tend to, the pendulum to the swing. We don't want a whiny kid, right? And so we tell this kid, don't cry. It's okay to cry sometimes. But like, how do we break the cycle? How do we help men early on to begin to develop a healthy understanding of how to deal with those emotions?
So, one of the things I'm really passionate about is just the idea of mentorship. And that's something that is so desperately needed for guys from all ages. I have guys that mentor me, I mentor other people. And so it's important to be able to speak into each other's lives in this way. And so, it's a combination of, well, now I'm this old, I can't get mentored maybe, but I can mentor somebody else, type of thing. Like you got to just jump in it at some point and do it. And in that is being able to be able to just invest in guys and walk with them. It's never a lecture thing. It's a walking with thing. It's
just doing life together.
Yeah. Doing real life together, doing stuff like, so like I've had teenage guys come over and, it's like, man, just come over and hang out by the campfire, and just talk and be guys,
And bust wood at John's house.
That's true.
Yeah.
We brought some guys over to John's house, did some wood, and so, but it's, here's the thing about guys and how you reach them. Okay. One of the things that you never really know what God is doing for you and what he's doing with your life until you are able to turn around and see what he did. And it makes sense. It's like, well, that's why I was doing that. Right. Me growing up in New York and moving to Virginia, me being raised Catholic and then going to a Baptist college, me being in all masculine related fields for the majority of my life and then becoming a feelings guy and going into the counseling profession, for me that, if you told me that 10 years ago that I was going to be a counselor, I mean, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. I am not a counselor, but in there was working through what God wanted me to learn and be able to really connect with guys. And that is the big, big part that makes me really successful in what I actually do, is because I can be real with people. I can be real with guys. And, doing things like what I kind of refer to as like tailgate therapy, which is you get a bunch of guys standing around a tailgate, they just start talking and stuff, and it's that community, it's that connection, and I'm working with, I've worked with teenage guys who were charged with felonies, who were stealing, like beating up their parents, doing drugs, growing drugs in their house, like you name it, they were doing it, and being able to sit next to that kid in his jail cell and say, hey man, let's just talk about this, and let's work through it. Let them know that you still love them. And it's like, man, you made a mistake. You just, I'm still here with you through the mistake. I love you. I don't condone that mistake, but once you're done with your stuff, we're going to get back together and we start move forward, And so it's doing life with guys and doing things to where they are able to have relationships. I mean, we don't trust people with our feelings. Mm-hmm. We don't, because we've been taught and conditioned through our whole lives not to have them. And so what happens when we enter into a relationship with our wives and we get married, and what does she say? You don't ever tell me how you're feeling. That's because we don't know, because we're stupid. we don't know what we're feeling.
See, that's key. That's something that I don't think people understand. And even if women listen to it, this is not a cop out, but this is saying that, like, if your wife or you're a wife that has a husband, or you know what I'm saying, you're a female that has a husband, and you're going, why don't you tell me how you're feeling? That's like you hit the nail on the head. It's like, I don't know how I'm feeling. I know if it sucks, I either feel I'm either scared or I'm pissed. Or I'm okay. Yeah. There's and so that's the like I said, you don't really know how to articulate well, this is what's going on in my heart, in my mind, in my life. You know, it's just it's very hard for us to do that. And it's like I said, because we've never been taught, and we've never had that model for us a lot of times, you know. And so, I think as if there are any women listening, man, be patient with your husband. But also, dudes, we need to start, learning how to articulate and open up and figure that out so we can, have a better relationship with our wife.
It can be terrifying, too, for guys to be honest about what they're really feeling. Because, you grow up. I mean, like, what's the big thing that you fear the most growing up is like losing
sharks in a pool.
I mean,
sharks in a pool. That's what
I thought. That in the bathtub, right?
That's definitely ranks in the top three.
Deep into the bathtub, he's coming for me. So you grow up, and you're careful about showing in your mind weakness, and so I think a lot of times, guys, is terrifying for us to be very open and honest with our feelings with our spouse too, because we don't want to lose face. You think about most of the fights you saw as a kid growing up, right? They weren't over earth-shattering things. They were because somebody was embarrassed and they got mad about it. And so there's a fear, even I think, that follows guys into, quote, manhood. And a lot of times they don't want to tell how they're feeling because they're terrified of losing face. They don't want to tell their wife, how afraid they are in a situation or whatever. And guys, we've got to, and you said this a while ago, man, and I keyed on it, and I wrote it down over here to ask you about communication. There's two different sides I want to look at with you, if you will. One, how can we articulate or begin growing into a place where we can articulate what we're feeling better and communicate better? Because I think we suck at it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Starting with me.
we do suck at it. I mean, I sucked at it for a long time, and even just, even the way that I behaved, before I was able to really, when I was in all those masculine fields, I mean, it was very, it was definitely not Christ-like. I mean, using angry language, which is demeaning, just horrible words that you should never be using, like saying things like that, and turn into,
such as what would be an example so we could
like stupid.
That's not angry. That's an accurate description, Mike.
That's an adjective. That's just an adjective.
So, so doing things like that, I mean, I've hit doors, hit walls. I mean, I've done that too, and it takes a lot of work as an individual to really pull that back. But it also takes, being mindful of what's going on. You really have to start learning that. And it does require people to walk beside you. I mean, it's a hard process. And, when, going back to kind of the husband and wife real quick, I mean, if you don't know how to deal and manage your own emotions, you don't know how to help her with hers. I mean, and she needs your help. I mean, she needs your help with that. Not that she's not able to articulate it, but you can't be a good supportive husband if you don't know how to take what she's given you and manage it in an appropriate way. I mean, we're so prone to being fixers. I mean, I love fixing things because that gives me a sense of completion. So when I see her crying, it's like, well, how do I fix this? So I'm already listening to fix it. I'm not listening to even hear it, And so when it comes to things like that, even again, working with all women, I mean, sometimes that, when they come up to me and they're like talking about something, I just even have to stop. I'm like, am I listening to fix this, or am I listening just to really empathize with this? And they'll tell me like, well, you're listening to empathize. And then I'm like, okay. And so then I'm listening. I'm like, you're right. Karen is just a horrible human being, like that type of thing,
Poor Karen.
So sorry, Karen. Karen's.
I feel for anybody in our society with the name Karen.
Yeah. Well, you know what?
Where'd that come from?
For like the first 10 years of my life. So.
It's true.
And then it went into Mike. Guess what day it is? I'm like, bro, I know what day it is. I've seen the commercial.
Hump day.
But anyway,
this is a side note because I'm ADD. Yeah. I am never mind. I'm not self-diagnosing. But anyway, what does Karen thing come from? Like, what is this Karen thing? I see it online, but what actually happened with? Like, what is it?
I don't know that it necessarily was a Karen, was it?
It is. I'm actually looking at an article about it right now. The Karen meme is being used to describe women who commit racist acts in public. It's being used to talk about haircut. It's apparently, I don't know, it's some meme. Maybe, I tell you what, guys out there in the Schtuff world.
If you've made it this far into the podcast.
If you've made it this far, somebody help us with that. You can email us at guystuff@gmail.com. We would like to know the history of where the Karen meme came from. And Karens out there, we apologize to you everywhere.
Yeah.
I don't apologize.
Never dated a Karen.
Thanks for falling on the meme sword.
For all of us to have fun doing something.
Yeah.
But so quick question. We kind of we're kind of one thing. I mean, and we can come back to this in a second. But me and Mike. I talked about this on another podcast of the episode. But me and Mike were actually sitting around a fire with a bunch of the guys, and we started talking about our relationship with our wives and how it's connected to a game that we probably all have played and like to play called Jenga, right? And so your sex life with your partner, with your wife, it's like playing a game of Jenga. And every time you say something stupid, you just slide one block out, right? Or every time you interacting with her and she like, hey, does this, it's like you said, am I listening to fix this or am I listening to just empathize? And you don't even ask that question. You just like, I ain't listening at all. Well, that's going to pull out 3 blocks at a time, and so there's this kind of connection with, we're trying to walk through our marriage in the sense of intimacy and relationship, in relationship, knowing each other in the biblical term. It's like playing a game of Jenga. And sometimes we just kick that joker over. We just go, you know what?
What I got out of that whole conversation was you can use the game of Jenga for sex for games. That's what I got.
I don't think you listen to what we're saying, Anthony.
No, I'm teasing you, man. No, you're right.
There lies the problem.
Exactly. See, he was trying to fix it.
I was trying to fix it.
Don't try to fix my analogy. Just agree with it.
When she says, I want you to make me happy, that's where it goes for God, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, you're spot on, man. No, John, I'm teasing you. You're 100% right.
But you're right. You're right. It can be a Jenga game. Your daily interactions is like a Jenga game, and that tower gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And if you make it to the end of the night and the Jenga tower is still standing, then you may have a good chance of winning. But at any moment, you can also have your 3-year-old kid come running in and kick that whole tower over after you've been working on it all day.
Mm-hmm.
I've been working on yesterday. John said, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. In the conversation he and I said yesterday. And that's guys right there. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. So, yeah.
But that goes back to something else we kind of talked about is and kind of goes back into this man's responsibility and women's responsibility and those kind of things. There is a time where you've done everything right. You're doing everything the best you can, and your wife's just not responsive in sexual ways, right? She may be having some emotional stuff. She may, whatever it is. And it may be a long time. A lot of us, unless you out there batting 1,000 or like you are, whatever, you like a really big guy. Not let's cut that part. Cut that part. Rewind back to what we're talking about. I'm trying to think how to articulate this. Unless you, I say it, unless you dropping it down real good, sometimes your wife is not going to be like, wanting it every night kind of thing, right? And so it may be an extended period of time that you're not having relations with your wife. Now, as a dude who has struggled with porn, who has struggled with everything else in there, that's when temptation is going to hit you a lot. And Satan's going to start saying like, oh, it's okay. She doesn't understand you. So it's okay to run to this over here to fix it. It's okay to go to this over here. It's okay to do those things because your wife is not responsible. And not because, oh, screw her. That's your mentality in the sense of, I don't care about her, but no, it's going to be, you've been trying to do that. You've been trying to build that relationship. You've been trying to be sensitive. You've been trying to talk with her. You've been trying to emotionally connect. For some reason she's not. And then she starts kind of pushing you away a little bit. There's going to be the tendency for Satan to come in and tempt you to go to pull to pornography, to pull to alleviating the problem yourself, fixing the problem yourself. You know what I'm saying? But there's this call that we're called to as men. It's a call to holiness. No matter what she does, no matter what she may be wrong in how she's responding to. She may be actually having to deal with stuff on her own sin issues because, believe it or not, women sin just as much as men do, right? In relationships, they screw it up just like we do. But anyway, the problem is that
flawed.
Was that?
We're all flawed.
Exactly, we're all flawed. But that does not give you a license to go over here and to go deeper into sin and to cause you to not be holy. And so that's one thing that just in my own walk and the own thing that God's really called me into is that, hey, even when you're doing things right, she may be unresponsive, whether it's sexually, emotionally, whatever it is, she may be unresponsive. That does not give you the proclivity to go and do something that is sinful. And so I just wanted to throw that out there and throw it in up in there, and we can bat it around and talk about it. So.
Yeah. Well, so, what's one of the things that I actually see a lot when I get a lot of referrals for guys who are stuck with using pornography, right? And anytime that there's a guy who's married and he's using pornography, it automatically becomes couples counseling for me. And that's not the same model that most places use. They use it as it's a man's struggle. It's an individual man's struggle. That is not the truth. When you really start understanding what a Christ-centered marriage is, like, you understand how it impacts your behavior, impacts your spouse, and the same with her. The example you're giving, it's like, well, she doesn't feel connected. I've been trying. It's not working. You're feeling what's going on with her. And so because we're idiot guys, when we don't know how to have emotional intelligence, we don't recognize that that's what's going on, that you're actually being attuned to your wife, And so what happens is these, guys, it's typically guys who are using the pornography, right? And so when they come in and they tell me, hey, I'm married and I'm using pornography, I bring the wife in and I have her come in and start working with us. And the first thing I have to overcome is her not thinking that here's this guy going to come in here and saying that I'm not giving him sex enough. And that's the problem. That is almost always not the problem. The problem is that they're not connecting emotionally and they're not getting that connection anymore. And, also what's really interesting is when guys use pornography and they're committing adultery. It's an act of infidelity against their wife. It is, and the reason why that's not just a theological thought I have. That's watching what it looks like when she comes in and she tells me that how she feels, and she goes through all the same exact things that a wife who experienced a husband who had an affair feels the same thing. Actually, in a sense, the feedback I get from the wives is, I'd almost rather him have had an affair with a real person, because at least I could say, well, she's got companionship. She's got a good conversation. Like, this is why he left me for her. Now, that's not an excuse to go have an affair, guys, right? That's not. But she would rather it be that, because when it comes to pornography, it's just a synthetic fake thing. So it's not even a real relationship. There's nothing behind it. It's just purely a sexual thing. At least that's what we think that it is. What it really is a desire for a connection, that emotional connection, that feeling good, what you get from your spouse. You get that connection from your spouse. When you use pornography, there's a whole process of chemical dumps that come out through your brain and makes you feel good. Those same chemical dumps is what happens with any other substance abuse. That's what happens when you're thinking about eating that those sweets, you know, like when you're thinking about eating food and you start tasting it already, that's the same thing that happens with pornography. Like, it's not the process of actually using it. When guys who really get immersed in that, they're actually having those chemicals dumping before they even get into it. It's like, okay, I know it's coming and I'm able to get into that, you know, and so that chemical dump starts happening before it even has pornography in front of it, you know, and it's the same thing with alcohol, drugs, you know, that's where all these things come from. Now, all those things are natural processes that's supposed to happen. I mean, that's what God has designed us to have in us, but it's supposed to be with our spouse. And if you think about it, if you're able to articulate emotion, and if you're saying, man, I had a bad day at work, what's easy is to go, well, I'm just going to go ahead and get that dopamine dump from pornography real quick, spend me a little 30 minutes doing something on my own, and then it'd be hungry again later because I'm not happy with that. It's not satisfying and it didn't fix my problem. Or I could do the hard route, which is go have a conversation with my wife on how I'm anxious, how I'm worried about work, how I'm stressed out, talk about it, and then have that connection with her emotionally. It doesn't have to be physical. And that same chemical comes out through that. And I think that's where the big, it's not a thing. I know that's where it's coming from. I mean, that's the issue with it. And that's why working as a guy, as an individual, you know, and this is something pastors really need to hear, because in there is a lot of, here, do this workbook by yourself type intervention. Or here, go to this group with these 6-7 guys who all struggle, and it becomes a culture of, well, if I want to be part of this culture, I need to be continually struggling with pornography so I can never actually get out of this cycle, because then I lose this connection that I have with actual guys that I'm talking with. You see what I mean? So in there is, how do you really get at the root of the problem? Well, it's being able to articulate emotion. Pornography is the fast food of feeling good. And anybody who's eating fast food knows you'll eat fast food and 2 hours later you're like, man, I'm hungry again. But you know it's not. It's a home cooked meal that it takes time to make it and prepare it, but it's good and you stay filled. You see, that's the big difference. And if guys can start thinking of it that way, and their wives can understand it that way, they can work closer together in a companionship, in a one body marriage that Christ has designed, that Christ has made for us, so that we can actually walk together in that. You see? So there it is.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, you hit a lot of really cool points. One thing I wanted to kind of pull out, Anthony, I'll throw it over to you.
You're good, buddy.
Is this, when you said this is adultery, right? This is the serious. This is how God looks at it, right? And this is how your wife may look at it, right? May have that emotion to it. So it is vitally important, if you are a guy that's struggling with it and your wife doesn't know, tell her. Get some friends around, get your pastor around her. Don't keep that secret. Don't keep that in, because you need to work through this together. You need to get through, because all that stuff's going to build and build and build, and it's going to even be worse in the long run than just trying to be open and honest with your wife about it. And that's one thing that I always say. We even talk with couples, like for early marriage, before their marriage, like premarital counseling. It's saying you need to tell every single thing you've ever done. Like, there needs to be no secrets, no little things hidden in the closet, no little things that can come back and Satan can use to thwart your marriage. And that's one thing that if you're keeping a secret, especially in the pornography realm, it's going to eat you alive. It's going to destroy your marriage. It's going to eat your marriage up from the inside out if you're trying to hide that. So I'm just telling you right now, from experience, talk with your wife about it. Talk with your pastor first. Talk with your friends. Whatever you're going to do, but eventually you need to have that conversation with your wife about this to get it all out and open. Would you agree with that from the counseling side, Mike? And then I'll throw it over to you, Anthony.
I would. I think the only thing I would share with premarital is, it is important to disclose things to your spouse or your future spouse. Certain things, when you roll into it, specific details about things should not be. Because what happens is, especially in Christians, is it creates a trauma response, like a PTSD response. And so if you did something specific with somebody at a certain place in a certain way, and you share that intricate detail, it's going to show up in the bedroom, and it's going to show up when they drive by that place, or they think about that place. And in there is, we don't know how to really manage that, and so it stays hidden. You know, one of the biggest questions that I always have to ask a couple when they come in is, what does it look like in the bedroom for you guys? And the reason for that is not because of some kind of perversion or journal or something.
You ain't going to trapeze. Where's your trapeze at, man? Where's your trampoline, trapeze?
But it's,
how much spandex do you own?
Right. So it's more about, people will come in and say, hey, we have a problem communicating. We have a problem emotionally connecting. You know, we are engaged in conflict. We have all these other issues that we're willing to talk about, but they won't ever bring up, hey, we haven't had sex in 2 years and we're a newly married couple. That's a problem. Yeah. That's a problem, because there's something going on that's preventing that from happening. And you have to really get into it, because they're not satisfied. I mean, there's scientific correlations with everything. You know, emotional connection with equals sexual satisfaction equals marital satisfaction. I mean, they're correlated. When all those things go up, that's what it looks like. And so if you're not asking that question in a counseling session, you know, you're not getting into the root of the issues either. And it's not that sex is the root of the issue. It is connection. It is intimacy. Intimacy by definition of having an intimate relationship with somebody, to be able to share your feelings, your struggles, they know you, they care for you. There's such a strong bond connection. I mean, intimacy is something that we should be having with Christ. And we use that word intimacy to sound like perversion. You know, so that's the only thing I would correct, you know, kind of correct with that is making sure that we're understanding that. You know, the other thing is making sure that we're not seeing, are you still there?
Yeah, we're here.
Oh, I lost the picture.
I still see you, man. You're still pretty.
Okay. I still see you, brother.
Okay. Well, I'll keep going then. The other thing is when you have the wife come in, self-accountability is the real accountability. Accountability partners, that's, you know, they don't really have real accountability over. I mean, if you think about it, like, what are they going to do? How are they going? What consequence do you have if you use pornography with your accountability partner? That's your buddy. Nothing really. Whether they're just going to be disappointed in you. And so what happens over time is, if you keep failing at this because you're struggling alone, and you're just struggling with somebody who's your accountability partner, your accountability partner gets defeated because they don't think they're helping you enough. So they fall through. And then what typically happens is the guy is like, man, I don't want to let my friend down. And so they just won't tell them anymore. And then they show up in my office, is like, yeah, I got an accountability partner. I've been struggling with pornography for 3-4 months now, and I keep telling them that I'm good. You know, so and the wife is
back to that losing face thing again, man.
Yeah,
and the guys don't want to lose face, and they will bend over backwards to not lose face. When if we would just, I apologize for interrupting you, but what I hear, man, is like, you know, again, we're trying to like hold on to what we feel like is our pride. Really, when you get right down to it, we don't want to be found out, but the only way there's freedom is to come clean. And you hit on something too. I think in the past, the church culture, at least in America, you had to be perfect. You know, saying is like, growing up, it was an absolute nightmare of legalistic perfection. So then the pendulum swung to like, where we're open and honest, we tell like everything. But I fear sometimes that we haven't grasped that we're more than conquerors, and that we should be honest about those things so we can conquer and overcome them, and not still be suffering from the same things 20 years later. Will there be a struggle? Yes, there'll always be that. You know, for me with anger, there's still that. I still have to work on that every single day. But I you know, at some point, and you can speak to this as the professional here, at some point the goal should be restoration, recreation, and sanctification. I sound like an old black preacher, but you know, it's that becoming new. And I think that's what I'm hearing you say. Am I right in that eventually, if we're really trying to grow and become who God has intended us to be, we got to get to the root and eventually get through this and be healed, if you will.
You know, so like pornography in itself is, you know, that cycle that you fall into is just like any other, is really just the same as it is when we could commit to follow Christ. I mean, you're always going to be battling sin. I mean, when we commit and we give our life to Him and we say, all right, God, you know, I'm in it, man, and I'm following you. Our honest thought and hope is that we're going to be able to maintain and continue to not do these things. But we can leave the church parking lot and be yelling at somebody who's in front of us because they're an idiot, you know.
Don't even make it to Bojangles and we cussing somebody out.
Exactly, which, you know, it's like, well, I messed that up. That is actually the same process that I see happen a lot of times with guys in pornography. Is they're like, I want this out of my life, especially Christians. In fact, when you look at research on use of Christians and non-believers, the use is different, the way they use.
How so?
Non-believers, their use is more often, but less amounts of time. So it's like, you know, they'll do it once a week and that'll be it. Okay. Believers will go like 2-3 weeks of abstinence and then they'll fall into it and do it multiple times in a section. And then they quit again. Because what happens is they essentially look at it as, I messed up. And, you know, I can't do it. And so you fall into this hole of guilt and shame, and you just repeat the behaviors until you're like, all right, I want to give it up again. Well, I mean, that's, you know, if you think about how we manage ourselves in fighting.
It's binging. Yeah.
Well, you know, it's like, well, I already had one beer, might as well have 3, you know, I already messed up, you know? And so it's that kind of thing. I mean, if you think about it, even with dieting, you know, if you're dieting and it's like, well, I already ate the big nasty hamburger that I shouldn't have ate, might as well eat the onion rings with it, you know? It's like you just throw in the towel. And so it's the same kind of mentality until you recommit to that. And so when it comes down to guys and trying to work through this on their own, this is what they face a lot. Is that struggle, that ongoing struggle of constantly battling it. Now, when you're able to start changing your behaviors and changing how you perceive this and battle this, you can get free from it. That does not mean that the thought doesn't creep in from time to time. You know, it really will. And you know, and you can see, you know, I can see even, you know, being at where I am in Lynchburg, I can see and track when it's going to get worse and better. All right. Great example. I mean, we got multiple colleges in this town, right? When it's wintertime, through like January, February, not a whole lot going on. When that first hot day comes across and all of a sudden there's a lot more flesh out there, the guys are messing up. You see a spike. When it comes down to the finals week and all the final terms, anxiety is really high. Use is up again. And what's interesting is some of the best data that you get on following and tracking these trends is the manufacturers of pornography who keep up with that. Wow. So they know what you're looking at, when you're going to look at it, and why you're going to look at it. And so they theme it, they make it all. I mean, they know. So I mean, you would think that they're just like a bunch of bumbling idiots just making these things. But really and truly, if you think about it, if you see what they're doing, even the videos that they make are a certain amount of time. And we know, even from like being at a university, we know the attention span of people is around 7 to 10 minutes. And if you see a video like on YouTube coming through, and it's like, well, this is a 30-minute video, I ain't got time for that. I'm not watching that. But I'll watch.
Hey, hold up, Coach East. You hitting too close to home, man. Swing it. Cut down a little bit.
I mean, that's commitment, you know. But you know what I mean? I mean, if you think about it, you're like, what is this? As you're scrolling through things, you're like, man, I'm not watching that, this thing for that long. And so we know that even as an educational standpoint, all our videos have to be 7 to 10 minutes long, somewhere in there, because if you go past that, people check out. So they have all that data on how to do this and what people are looking at, what they want to look at, when they're looking at it. And so when you get things like that, the use is even more of a struggle. I mean, there's algorithms that are out there that, Snapchat and, all these, others, Instagram, all these other platforms have, even Pandora. I mean, like, I love 70s music. And so there's like, I mean, I was born in 79, but I'm not a 70s person. I wasn't a teenager in the 70s, but I definitely get advertisements on the side there for like 60-year-old women, and I'm like, as far as like, meet and chat with in the Pandora commercials, and you have things for like AARP, all these other things that would be set up for somebody that would fit the demographic of who would be listening to 70s music. Not a 40-year-old.
If YouTube is listening, you can when we do our non-sexual music decades 1960, 1970, you can put that up on an ad there too. Just letting YouTube and Google know that.
Wait, you're gonna have music from the 60s and 70s that's non-sexual?
Non-sexual.
Music that does not suck.
Oh, non-sexual. I thought you said non-sexual. I was just saying, well,
that's why we say it that way.
Yeah. The 60s and 70s music, as I recall, is usually about, a lot of different things like that.
It's just very subtle. It's very subtle.
Yeah, clearly.
Very subtle, yes. Mm-hmm.
But no, I was a shameless plug for an upcoming video that you may be interested in watching if you're listening to the Guy Schtuff podcast, coming to you every Tuesday afternoon.
Back to you, Dr. Mike.
Yeah. So
it's Dr. Tacaks, man. It's Dr. Tacaks. I told you 12 times, Anthony. Dr. Tacaks.
Hey, man. We're friends now. I can call him Dr. Mike. Because if he had a show, when he gets his own show, they're not going to call it Dr. Tacaks. They don't, because nobody can say that from the South.
Nobody can say it. Nobody can spell it.
So it's gonna be Mondays with Dr. Mike.
It's actually Tacaks.
Tacaks.
That's really how it's supposed to be said. Yeah.
What do you like? German, Dutch? What is it?
It's Hungarian.
Hungarian. How about that?
Yeah.
Oh, look at that.
My grandparents changed the pronunciation of it when they came, but not the spelling, so it doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't.
You still can't say it or spell it. So, but anyway.
You were one of them kids when they gave out awards in middle school.
Yeah. When they start stuttering with the T, and then you're like, "That's me." I got
Michael Tatanka, Mike.
A great movie.
Tatanka.
So
anyway, Mike.
Speaking of movies with tribes, for the tribe of guys who've made it this far, or maybe just fast forward to the end. 3 things our guys listening can work on by way of kind of landing the plane. 3 things guys can work on to not change their wives, because that's where we screw up so often. That's a whole other episode. Your job is not to change your wife. If you set out to change another person, it is never going to work.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a professional, but
that's legitimate.
It's just the way it is. So what can we do to become better, more godly versions of who God's calling us to be? 3 quick things, and then John, you land the plane. You put us safely on the tarmac with Dr. Tacaks.
Man, you asking wrong, but we're gonna burn in. We're gonna just
belly slide, clean.
Exactly. Whatever works, man.
3 things. Yeah. So learn how to listen correctly. What you output is going to be determined based on what you input. And so if you're able to listen to your wife the way that she needs you to listen to her, even if it's qualifying what she's saying by asking her, hey, how are you wanting me to fix a problem? you know, and you got to ask it and say that in a kind way. You can't be like, am I fixing a
problem? You want to fix a problem, or you want me to just listen to you?
Or am I just have to listen, you know? You know, so learn how to listen better, not just with your spouse, but with everybody, and that's going to help you. Try to change your lens in which you look at people, all people. You know, one of the things that you become a counselor, it's not that people's behaviors and actions are excusable, but they can be understandable. You see? So being able to look at your wife and through the eyes of Christ and just saying, okay, well, I still love this person as a person. What is it that's going on? Why would they think or feel this way about something? You know, what would cause them to be that way? You know, I think the last thing was it would be just to continuously try to communicate better with your spouse. You know, take the time to be intentional about that. I mean, that's actually when I have couples counseling, that's the first thing I make them do is make time to be intentional with each other, because oftentimes the marriage, the relationship is put at the end of the day, and that's where we mess up with our Jenga tower. You see, we think we've been working on it all day long, and we haven't. You know, at least we've been playing the game, but she ain't been playing with us. And so when we're done, like, look, it's still standing. What's up?
And then you're playing by yourself, you know.
That's right. Which is the thing we're trying not to do.
Exactly.
Well, you know, you hit on something, and I think guys, and I want us all, myself included, if we will work at, I feel like, if we'll work at being the right kind of person, that other stuff, to a great degree, will kind of take care of itself.
Mm-hmm.
It's the little stuff, you know. It's the little stuff like putting the toilet lid down. I mean, just, you know, really, it's the little stuff. It's the little stuff like, you know, pick flowers. Like this. One of the things my wife, like, that just excited her the most was a few years ago. We were house hunting, and she commented on some daffodils beside the road, how pretty they were. I slammed on brakes, got out. I dumped the Chick-fil-A cup out. I dumped the Chick-fil-A cup out, and I pulled my knife out, because I'm in the South, and you carry a knife in the South always, right? And I went to cutting, and I created this lady a bouquet of daffodils from the side of the road. She still talks about it. It's that little stuff. And guys, I think a lot of times we try to check boxes. Like, if I do X, Y, and Z, I'm going to get lucky tonight. If you just spend your time checking X, Y, and Z, then if you have sex, you were lucky because you're stupid. You got to spend time really focusing on, we are called to love our wives as Christ loves the church. That's it. If we focus on that, for me, this is what I had to come to in my own life, because I sucked as a husband. I was terrible. It was the worst. And when I started the process, we started that process of healing, Dr. Mike, I tried to change her. I tried everything, and then realized, wait a second, I'm the problem. So a lot of us, that's where we need to start. I feel like we need to walk in the bathroom, cut on the light, and stand in front of the mirror and realize you're the problem. And if we focused on loving our wives as Christ loved the church, a lot of that other stuff, not always, because there's deeper issues to work through, but that will at least begin to peel the layers back to take care of it. And that's all I got to say. I'll let you hit that, Dr. Mike, and then John, belly flop this plane.
Yeah, good analogies there, and good thoughts. I mean, that's really what we need to do, is just being conscious of ourselves, you know, and you know, being able to admit that we did something wrong and moving forward from it. You know, even when it comes to, you know, when we're starting to try to articulate emotion or be connection or do communication better, you have to have some of that self-compassion and grace towards yourself and towards your spouse as a couple, you know? And so that comes down to even coming back and saying, hey, I did that wrong, and I want to try and do that conversation again, you know? And, or, it's a self-improvement process. And the more that you work on that, the better you are, not just being a spouse, man, being a parent, being a child being a son of your family, being a brother, being a colleague, being a friend, being all those things. It just helps you be better at it. And, so it really grows you as an individual. And I think that's self-improvement is something, self-investment is something that you should always be working on anyways, no matter where you are in life. And it's never too late to start that. So, so if guys are listening to that, be a little self-compassionate and try to work towards that constantly. And it'll just make you better at everything else.
That's good. John, last words yours, boss man.
Yeah, brother. And I mean, all of us great. I think the conversation has been really helpful, been helpful me even to kind of think through things. And one thing I'd like to just leave all our guys with is that everything we're talking about here, all that the self-help, the self growing and all these things and getting there, that all starts with your relationship with Jesus. If that's not there, none of the other stuff's gonna really matter. Right. And so if we can start there with our relationship with Jesus, and that tends to bleed out to our wives and how we're in our relationships, because when we're not connected, our first intimacy point with Jesus, then everything else gets skewed and everything else gets thrown out the window too, because our initial, how we're actually going to have any kind of heart change, mind change is off. It's going to be a very hard process. And so I would just say everybody that's listening, even to my own self, let's make sure that's number one. And then as that connection is made and that connection is established and that connection is grown, then we can actually have the clarity to pull the plank out of our eyes and start going into those kind of things and start working our relationship with our wives and our children and our family, all those things. And that's just one thing that for me that I really, that stood out with what Mike was saying was, before I even started, was like, we have to have this relationship with Christ in order to do anything. And I think that's of course, that's the biggest difference between what the world says about psychology and what, Christian psychologists or Christian psychiatrists are going to say, Christian counseling, is that, hey, it all starts relationship with Jesus. And if that's out of whack, ain't nothing gonna get fixed for long. And so, so everybody out there, man, if you need help, if you need something there, hey, if you're in Virginia, if you're not, you can call, make an appointment with Dr. Tacaks right now. You can call him and say, hey, I need to talk with him. Mike, is there a way that if somebody that's in the Virginia area or Lynchburg area, or even that would want to do, now that we're on this Zoom, kick now, I mean, I'm sure people are starting doing Zoom counseling sessions and stuff soon. How can somebody get in touch with you, brother?
So I have a clinical practice in Lynchburg called Kairos Counseling, and that name actually stemmed from my dissertation, which was based on the identity that happens with somebody who's addicted to pornography, to where it actually changes. And so Kairos Counseling, VA.com is our website, and so they can schedule through that. I'll be happy to help you.
So. Well, this has been Marriage Under the Microscope with Dr. Mike here on the Guy Stuff podcast. Thanks for hanging out with us. We got a lot of stuff, and guys, if you're struggling, if you're dealing with something, do reach out to somebody. Nobody has to deal with stuff alone. And John said it, and it's the most important thing, guys, is our relationship with Christ. When we key on that, when we focus on that, this other stuff starts to come in sharper focus. So thanks for hanging, guys, and we will see you next time on the Guy Stuff podcast. Peace.